The Ravencroft estate stood on the edge of Blackthorn Moor like a rotting crown upon a dead king's head. For over 3 centuries, its stone walls had absorbed secrets, screams, and the quiet despair of those who lived and died within them. Locals avoided the place, not because of superstition alone, but because history itself seemed to recoil from the name Ravencroft. Every generation left behind a stain darker than the last, as if the family were bound by a curse older than the land beneath the manor. Records show wealth, influence, and respectability, but beneath the polished surface lay a lineage steeped in cruelty, obsession, and unspeakable acts that were never meant to see daylight. The earliest known Ravencroft, Alistair Ravencroft, arrived in the late 1600s under mysterious circumstances. No one knew where his fortune came from, only that it arrived suddenly and violently displaced 3 farming families whose land he claimed by royal decree. Alistair was described as tall, unnervingly thin, and rarely seen in daylight. Villagers whispered that he spoke to himself in the fields at night, digging holes that he later filled without explanation. When livestock began turning up drained of blood and arranged in deliberate patterns, the blame was never spoken aloud. But everyone knew. Fear kept mouths shut, and gold kept officials obedient. As the years passed, servants came and went, but none stayed long. Journals recovered centuries later tell of bells ringing on their own, of locked rooms that breathed, and of the West Wing where no one was allowed after sunset. One maid wrote of hearing a child crying behind the walls, even though no children lived there at the time. Another vanished entirely, her name struck from records as if she had never existed. The Ravencrofts did not bury their dead in the village cemetery. Instead, they constructed a private crypt beneath the manor, sealed by iron doors and guarded by silence. By the mid-1700s, the family had grown in number and in reputation. Edmund Ravencroft, Alistair's grandson, was a man obsessed with purity of blood and legacy. He believed the Ravencrofts were chosen, elevated above ordinary humanity. His letters reveal experiments conducted in the manor's cellar, rituals blending early science with forbidden theology. Bodies were acquired quietly, prisoners, travelers, the poor. Edmund believed pain unlocked divine knowledge, and the screams echoing beneath the manor at night were, to him, prayers being answered. The turning point came in 1764, when a fire broke out in the servant quarters. While the upper floors remained untouched, 17 servants died trapped below. Witnesses swore the doors had been locked from the outside. Edmund claimed it was an accident, yet he never mourned. Instead, he commissioned new tunnels beneath the estate, expanding the underground chambers into a labyrinth that would later be called the Ravencroft Underhall. Maps of it were never made. Those who entered were expected to remember the way or not return. Generations followed, each inheriting the estate and the darkness that clung to it. Some tried to resist. Margaret Ravencroft, born in 1812, was said to be kind, intelligent, and deeply troubled by her family's past. She attempted to open the manor to the public, donating land to the church and speaking openly about reform. But her efforts were short-lived. One winter morning, she was found in the crypt, seated upright among the coffins, her eyes sewn shut with black thread. The official ruling was suicide. The family sealed the crypt again, and Margaret's name was never spoken aloud within the manor walls. By the Victorian era, the Ravencrofts had learned to hide their sins behind manners and influence. Dr. Theodore Ravencroft, a respected physician, gained fame for his studies of the human mind. Patients traveled miles to seek his care, unaware that many would never leave. Hospital records show dozens transferred to Ravencroft Manor for private treatment. None were ever discharged. Theodore believed fear was the purest emotion and sought to preserve it, literally. Preserved organs, skin stretched over frames, faces frozen in terror were catalogued and stored beneath the house like trophies. The manor itself began to change. Walls cracked in unnatural patterns, rooms shifted slightly from year to year. Servants reported hallways leading somewhere new, doors that no longer opened where they once had. Some believed the house was alive, feeding on the cruelty within it. When a young groundskeeper attempted to flee in 1891, he was found days later wandering the moor, blind and muttering about the mouths in the walls. He died shortly after, his tongue removed with surgical precision. The final chapter of the Ravencroft family began in 1923, when the last known heir, Eleanor Ravencroft, inherited the estate. Unlike her ancestors, Eleanor kept detailed journals, perhaps believing that confession might absolve her. She wrote of dreams where the dead walked the halls, of voices demanding continuation of the family's work. She tried to leave, but claimed the house would not allow it. Each attempt ended with her waking back in her bed, the front doors locked, her shoes caked with mud as if she had walked for miles without memory. Neighbors noticed strange lights in the manor at night, flickering like candles in a tomb. Screams returned to the moor, though no guests were ever seen arriving. In 1929, authorities finally intervened after smoke was seen rising from the west wing. What they found inside was beyond comprehension. The house was empty, no Eleanor, no servants, but the walls were covered in writing, etched deep into the stone with fingernails and blood. Names filled every surface, hundreds of them, some dating back centuries. The Ravencroft estate was sealed by government order and later abandoned. Attempts to demolish it failed repeatedly. Machines malfunctioned, workers quit after unexplained injuries, and one man vanished during a routine inspection. Today, the manor still stands, decaying but unyielding. Locals claim that on certain nights, figures can be seen moving behind the windows, and that if you stand too close, you can hear breathing beneath your feet. Historians argue whether the Ravencroft family were monsters, madmen, or victims of their own beliefs. But one thing remains undeniable. Wherever human cruelty is nurtured and passed down like an inheritance, it leaves scars that time cannot erase. The Ravencroft Manor is not just a ruin. It is a reminder that some families do not die out. They simply sink into the walls waiting to be remembered. And if history has taught us anything, it is this: some stories stay buried for a reason. The story of the Ravenscroft family begins long before their name became synonymous with dread. In the late 1600s, when superstition ruled as firmly as law, the Ravenscrofts arrived on the outskirts of Blackmoor Valley, a place already avoided by travelers for its unnatural silence and perpetually overcast skies. The land they claimed was old, far older than any record could explain, and locals whispered that even the crows refused to nest there. Yet Edmund Ravenscroft, a man of severe posture and colder eyes, purchased the land without hesitation. He spoke little of his past, only that his family had endured great trials and needed isolation. Within a year, a vast stone manor rose from the soil like a tomb carved for the living, its windows narrow and watchful, its halls echoing even when empty. From the beginning, the Ravenscroft household obeyed rules that defied reason. Servants were forbidden from entering the east wing after sunset, mirrors were covered at night, and no prayers were allowed within the manor walls. Those who questioned these customs were dismissed or vanished entirely. Villagers claimed to hear chanting from the house during storms, voices layered upon voices, as if generations were speaking at once. The first recorded tragedy came in 1702, when Edmund's eldest son, Thomas, was found dead at the base of the manor stairs, his body twisted unnaturally, his eyes wide with unmistakable terror. The official cause was declared an accident, but servants whispered of scratches on the walls and blood beneath Thomas's fingernails, as if he had been dragged. As decades passed, death became a constant presence within Ravenscroft Manor. Children were born sickly and pale, often speaking of shadows that followed them through corridors. Family journals, later recovered in fragments, spoke of dreams that felt more like memories, visions of rituals, sacrifices, and a voice beneath the house that promised power in exchange for obedience. Each generation of Ravenscrofts seemed bound to continue a pact none fully understood, yet none dared to break. The east wing, sealed behind iron doors, was rumored to contain a chapel built upside down, its altar carved with symbols that predated Christianity itself. By the mid-1700s, the surrounding village began to suffer alongside the family. Livestock were found mutilated, crops failed without explanation, and children reported seeing tall figures watching from the tree-line near the manor. Whenever villagers confronted the Ravenscrofts, they were met with cold generosity, food, coin, and quiet threats masked as concern. Parish records reveal that every attempt to investigate the manor ended abruptly, either halted by sudden illness or bureaucratic interference mysteriously funded by the Ravencrofts themselves. The most infamous chapter came in 1768, during the rule of Eleanor Ravenscroft, a woman described as brilliant, devout, and utterly unfeeling. Under her leadership, the family withdrew completely from public life. Black carriages arrived at night, delivering sealed crates and unnamed guests who were never seen leaving. That winter, the manor burned from the inside, though no flames were visible from outside its walls. Survivors later described corridors blackened with soot but untouched by fire, and a smell that was neither smoke nor decay, but something ancient and metallic. Eleanor was found alive in the ruins, kneeling in the east wing, whispering gratitude to something no one else could see. After the fire, the Ravenscrofts rebuilt, stronger and more fortified than before. Yet the curse, or covenant, began to demand greater payment. Children died younger, madness took hold earlier, and members of the family began recording confessions in hidden walls and beneath floorboards. One journal described the manor as a mouth that must be fed. Another claimed the house shifted at night, rearranging rooms to confuse those who walked its halls. Servants spoke of doors that led nowhere and staircases that descended longer than the house should allow. In 1821, an investigator named Samuel Whitlock infiltrated the estate under the guise of a tutor. His writings, recovered years later, provide the clearest account of what lay beneath Ravenscroft Manor. He described a subterranean chamber carved directly into bedrock, its walls pulsing faintly, etched with names spanning centuries. At the center lay a pit without visible bottom, from which warm air rose, carrying whispers in languages Whitlock could not identify yet somehow understood. He wrote that the Ravenscrofts were not worshippers, but caretakers, chosen long ago to maintain a seal that, if broken, would allow something immeasurable to rise. Whitlock disappeared before he could publish his findings. Days later, the village of Blackmoor was abandoned almost overnight, its residents fleeing without explanation. Official records cite plague, but no bodies were ever found. Ravenscroft Manor stood alone once more, isolated and silent, its windows dark yet never empty. The final documented tragedy occurred in 1913, when the last known Ravenscroft, a boy named Julian, was discovered wandering the ruins of the estate after a collapse sealed much of the structure underground. He spoke calmly of his family's duty, of the hunger beneath the earth, and of how the house would no longer wait. Before authorities could question him further, Julian took his own life, smiling as if relieved. Today, Ravenscroft Manor no longer appears on official maps, yet hikers and urban explorers continue to report its presence, sometimes intact, sometimes in ruins, always watching. Those who claim to have entered speak of echoes that repeat thoughts before they are spoken, and of a sense that the house remembers them. No one who has stayed past sunset has ever returned unchanged, and some have never returned at all. The macabre history of the Ravenscroft family does not end with their bloodline. If the journals are to be believed, the family was only the latest in a long line of keepers. The question that lingers is not what destroyed the Ravenscrofts, but whether the seal they maintained still holds. And if it does not, whether the house will choose a new family to take their place. Because some legacies do not die. They wait.